I
You're like,
don't
no,
punch people.
I'm just
I
doing.
don't. I
Wasn't
don't
the Thriller
start fights.
Manila boxing match? Showing up and knocking on
Knock,
doors with
knock,
no appointment
baby.
is.
Hi. How you doing?
You're not kidding.
Russia for 2 months underwater. That's a long time holding your breath.
I don't think that my anxiety could handle being trapped in a submarine for a day, let alone 2 months.
My brother fought in the UFC. He lasted 5 minutes. Obviously found out he's claustrophobic.
I'm going to try sales instead, where I have a lot more opportunity to be in control of my financial destiny. But luckily, I was good, and I've been doing it ever since.
We call ourselves rhinos. There's more than one ways to skin a cat.
Or you're like skipping down the street through the rain singing a song.
You ever worked with a rock star?
A rock star, a ninja, a guru, all of them.
Now the man you've been waiting for, John, the sales machine, Rankins.
Okay, let me do this my own way. If you want to build your pipeline and transform your sales teams, this episode is going to be for you. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome her to the show, Leslie Venetz. Welcome.
Thanks. So glad to be here, John.
Well, I'm glad you're here, and thanks for making time out of your busy schedule to accommodate us and to help our listeners learn, what's working in outbound B2B sales. You did 250,000 cold calls. How did you even get involved in sales?
Yeah, we're meeting in the middle. You're coming in early, I'm staying late, but it's that important of a topic. I got involved in sales because I was interviewing for a bunch of jobs straight out of college, and they were all offering like 25K, 28K, and that was it. That was the most I was going to be able to make, and maybe would be eligible in a year for a 3% raise. And I just said, no, I work too hard. I care too much. I'm too smart to be stuck in a job where my earnings are capped like that. So I said, I'm going to try sales instead, where I have a lot more opportunity to be in control of my financial destiny. It also means that I could have made only $18,000 because that is the base annual salary in the first job I took. So it could have gone really badly if I was bad at sales, but luckily I was good, and I've been doing it ever since. 250,000 cold calls later.
1,000 phone calls. Was it cold calls or phone calls, or in person, or all cold? But was it on the phone?
Yeah.
Or
yeah. Phone.
Yeah, because I did it.
Yeah, we were
that way.
We were talking before we went live that I've done a little bit of doorstepping, but I think that folks that go door to door are like the grittiest, most courageous sales professionals out there.
Well, we call ourselves rhinos, but there's more than one ways to skin a cat. And, I'm always open to learning. And I've went literally from door to door, B2B, face to face, whether it's kiosks in the malls, selling literally everything from ADT alarms, credit cards, skincare, car care, and then building and scaling teams. And now I'm in the software game because I built a software company, the Sales Machine. And yeah, it's B2B. It's very different terrain. We always talk about being a chameleon. You got to be able to read the room and adapt to your environment. You got to change the color based on the situation. So for me, it's been a leap to go from one-on-one to one-on-many to speaking on stages, closing a deal in a boardroom when there's 5 decision makers on the board, as well as the CEO. So tell me how you got started as far as, dialing for dollars and then scaling what you do.
Dialing for dollars. Yeah. The first job that I had out of college, I grew up in the state of Montana. So I grew up in like a town of 60,000, and I moved a couple of days after graduating to Chicago, like a city of 6 million, without a job. I took this cold calling job, and I'm aging myself a little bit here, John, but it was not that long ago. But we sat at our desks with a phone, no computer, a stack of printed leads. And when we needed to send a proposal out, because it was 7 pages and we didn't have the email bandwidth, we would have to fax it over. So just set the stage a little bit there. So I just sat at my desk all day and pounded the phone. And I was good enough at it that within 2 months, I got a merit-based promotion because I had closed enough deals to get that next promotion, but I had done it faster than anybody in recent memory had done it. Like nobody that was there remembered anybody else doing it beforehand. And it was this moment of kind of going from having begrudgingly taken a sales job, not because I wanted to do sales, but just because I wanted a little bit more control over my, financial future, to thinking, ooh, I'm really good at this. I might love this. This might actually be my career.
Yeah. Did you struggle in the beginning? Or were you a natural?
Both. I think I struggled, and I was also a natural. I struggled because sales is hard and rejection is hard. And shortly after I started that job, or I guess really as I was starting that job, it was the beginning of the Great Recession. And so in my very first cold calling job ever, I was calling Fortune 500 CFOs during the Great Recession. As you can imagine, they were a fairly hostile prospect to be calling on at that time. So it was hard. Like it was really, really hard work. Every single call I had to absolutely be on my A game, but skills that I wouldn't have been able to name at the time, like curiosity and the ability to ask questions and empathy, helped a lot. So it did make it easier for me. It made it feel natural in many ways. But at the time, I wouldn't even been able to say that those were soft skills. I don't even think I knew that language at the time. Extremely hard. It required a lot of grit. It required a tremendous ability to let rejection sort of blow away and to just keep going. But when I reached somebody that was open to having a conversation with me, I had an extremely high win rate.
Yeah, I like it. And, so even in my career doing sales, literally, from the street to, the boardroom, I've had the experience of watching and learning and growing and evolving my own skills because it's a different environment. So you train organizations, you've built sales teams throughout your career. And, one thing you've said is spray and pray is dead. Aaron Ross, who built Salesforce and talks about Outbound 2.0. He's been on the podcast. He's an amazing dude. How do you approach what you do now and teach B2B teams to be more effective? And how have you seen the evolution of sales from just totally cold to now it's almost like it's warm?
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because I hate the term warm outbound, which people are trying to make a thing, but really they're just describing doing their job, but it's still cold because anytime that a prospect has not explicitly asked us to reach out to them, that is still cold outbound. Where we're at right now in the evolution of sales, though, is that it can't be bitter, ice cold, where we have not done some homework to make sure that we are trying to contact the right person with the right message at the right time. So I think that's the big change that I've seen is, almost 20 years ago when I started cold calling, you could get away with sort of some bad research, some lazy behavior if you were willing to brute force it. And that is just not the case anymore. I think one of the things that I talk about, so my debut book is about ready to come out August 5. And one of the topics that I cover is the philosophy of earn the right. And that's what I train a lot of teams on, is having a litmus test, like before you send that email, before you knock on the door, before you show up to discovery meeting, what have I done to earn the right to ask this prospect for their attention, for their time, for their business? And you do that by showing up with some insights, by having done your research, by being ready to share value. And I just don't think that sellers were held to that same standard even 15 to 20 years ago.
Yeah. And a lot of that, because there's the evolution of sales. I mean, literally boiler room sales, car sales. There's beliefs out there about, salespeople. A lot of them are scammy or salesy or pushy. And it's true. It's true because so many salespeople are not coming from service. And if you don't come from service, you're always nervous because it's about you. You're focused on you. You're focused on your commission breadth and making money. And you're really not showing up to be in service. That's where I've always, from a young age, whether I was a paper boy mowing lawns, I was always coming from service. So sales to me were effortless because I'm there. I'm at your door with a lawnmower and I'm saying, hey, your lawn is wrecked. I'd love to help you out. Right. Or I'm a paper boy and I'm like, did you get the news today? I noticed there's no newspaper and you're not on my route. It was always service. Now, I think along the way, things got a bit distorted in my own career when, I was just pushed and driven, whether it was for my own economic factors, right? And or the company creating that boiler room kind of environment, like you must sell rather than taking care of people. And in my organization, I'm always about service. I'm just a Zig Ziglar guy. SSS, service, solve problems, and make sure they're satisfied. And that's the formula for a recipe, or the formula for wealth.
I love
right?
that. Yeah, it actually sounds like we have a very similar philosophy approach to sales. And, you asked me the question, in my first sales job, was it easy or was it hard? And it was hard, but to your point, what made it easy is that my default was really caring deeply and really wanting to help people. And that's also what flipped the switch between me being a bit ashamed that I was doing sales as a job and then deciding to make it my profession, my passion, because I realized that the core, the root of sales is helping people. But you hit on something else, John, that I think is so important, that throughout my career, and I still see it on Instagram, on TikTok, YouTube, is this narrative that we are in a win-lose competition with our prospects, with our customers, and that for us to win, somehow they have to lose, and that we need to do whatever it takes to win. And I found that to be total bullshit. It is very possible, not just possible, but important that we are striving towards win-win outcomes with our prospects.
Yeah, that's transactional, and that's one and done. That's a one-night stand. There's no value. There's absolutely no value in a one and done transactional sale. And there's no wealth creation from it as well. Because for me, wealth is not just money. I mean, wealth is relationships. The more relationships you can build, the more relationships you can have, the more referrals you're going to get, the better quality of life you're going to have. And, Zig Ziglar says it best, serve them, solve a huge problem. You'll make more money and then make sure they're satisfied and they'll keep coming back. I just sold one of my offices and, it's a great thing. Same broker I've used for years. And the buyer, he bought a house from his broker 20 years ago when he had one child. Now he has 7 and 23 dogs. Is that what you said, V? 13 dogs, 7 children, 13 people live in his house, 5 helpers.
Wow.
He's got a compound, but she built a relationship with him and he's bought 4 or 5 different houses. And now my office for me, I have several others. So, I'm fine, but that's the power of relationships and building long-term wealth. So, but I love what you're doing with the B2B space. And, for me, there's legends out there, right? Like Jeb Blunt from Fanatical Prospecting and Aaron Ross, Outbound 2.0. And 50% of the prospecting or the sale is done by the research. What do you know about the ICP, your ideal client profile? What do you know about the individuals in their industry? What's new about that company? Do they have a system? Do they not have a system? Are they frustrated? Are sales plateauing? Are they growing? Where are you at? So let's talk about how you're helping go-to-market founders and the evolution of all of the sales and what's working right now.
Yeah. It's interesting because you were telling that story about buying and selling real estate. And what I heard you say was that it was about trust. They went back to those people because they had a relationship rooted in trust. And that's also what I'm seeing work extremely well in B2B outbound. And the path to trust is through research. It's through building really segmented lists. So you're super clear exactly who you're talking about, and then creating segment specific messaging so that when they're getting this outbound, when they're getting the cold calls, the emails, the LinkedIn DMs, whatever it is, they trust from the jump that you understand what outcomes are important to them, what's going on in their life, the pain points that they're overcoming, the challenges that they're facing. And that's how you immediately capture their attention and you invite them to engage with you. It's literally so important to Outbound that the book is 18 chapters, and like the first part is more about like that earn the right and trust, etc. But when we get into like the meat of how to build profit generating pipelines, I have 4 chapters where we just talk about how to figure out who the right person is and then how to send them a message because you've done the research and you understand what their outcomes are, and then how to try to get it in front of them at the right time on the right channel. So I love that question because I think that what drives effective pipelines today, to your point, is not spray and pray. You might get a couple leads back, but at the same time, you're burning a ton of bridges. You're maybe burning your domain reputation, but being really, really smart about taking the time and doing the research to decide who you want to talk to and what you want to say to them is what is propelling revenue for organizations right now.
Yeah. And so what's your approach to actually doing that? I mean, for me and how we literally work at the sales machine, marketing and sales are tied together at the hip. So ultimately, marketing, your role is selling without selling. Your role is positioning the salesperson to be more effective. And the way you're going to do that is not just branding and organic content, but I want you actually taking the MQLs and setting them up to be the SQL for the salesperson and get an SDR actually qualifying them before I get an account executive or a high-level business development manager on a call. But with the same skill set, just not as much seasoned experience as far as business knowledge. So for me, prospecting is key, but you got to come from service. You got to know who's a qualified prospect to get a high-level business development manager on the call, or get me on the call. Throw me in, coach, because I'm happy to talk to someone. You know, I'm lonely. I'm lonely. I feel alone sometimes.
I hear what you're saying because you do want to make sure that the time that your account executives are spending with prospects is being spent with folks that have the ability and the interest and the need. So I hear what you're saying. What I advise organizations to do are 2 things, and it depends how much data they have. If they have a pretty good amount of data about who is buying, how fast they're buying, the average price points, the renewal rates, etc., where I always recommend we start is looking at that internal data and then building lists based on lookalike companies. Not only because you have those cues already to know like, hey, this person's likely to buy pretty quick, or they're likely to buy at a premium price point, but because you already have closed a company that's similar, you can use social proof. So that generally helps sales cycles. I also work with a lot of companies that simply don't have enough clean data to be able to feel confident about exactly who their ICPs are. And so what I do is I advise them to look at their SOM, or, who they think their sales obtainable market is, which is going to be, maybe thousands of accounts, and to pick segments within it to go after with their outcome specific messaging. So that might look like stacking, say, like 4 or 5 firmographic filters so that they're really clear about the type of account that they're going after. And then maybe a demographic filter so they're only targeting, say, the CFO, not finance executives, right? It's the CFO because the CFO cares about a lot different outcomes than like a director of accounting or a VP of FLP&A or FP&A. And then from there, if they can find some sort of signal, like they just made a key hire, they won an award, they fired 20% of their IT department, something that helps them get really clear on the type of account, the type of person, what that type of person would care about, and then what's going on in their organization right now that would make them give a shit about the problems that you're solving, right? So it's about figuring out how to build lists where you're pretty darn sure that the things that they need to solve for are what your product and solution can offer. And then that gives you the opportunity to start the conversation with problem-centric or outcome-centric messaging instead of what we usually see, which is really product-centric messaging that's like, here's my feature, saves time and money, because that type of messaging just does not move the needle for prospects anymore.
Yeah. And I mean, you get a ton of them every day in your inbox, right? So in doing the research, how effective or how many different channels do you advise companies to utilize to actually do the outbound messaging and or the touch points?
Yeah, it's funny because I was actually just doing the final edits on this chapter last night. Three is the absolute minimum. And so most people are doing email and phone, and then they're adding in social media. Usually that social media is LinkedIn, but it can be a different social depending on where your customers live. And then I think you'll love this, John. What I always recommend is beyond those 3 channels, see what other channels might work for you, because maybe it is doorstepping, or maybe it is spending a lot of time in the field with your clients. Maybe it's events. Maybe it is a closer collaboration with marketing so that you are hosting webinars, you're doing direct mail, you're gifting. So 3 channel minimum, but don't get stuck in the rut of thinking the only 3 channels that are worth using are email, phone, and social.
Yeah, I'm not in the rut. I like to go on walks. Knock, knock. How you doing? Jeffrey Gitomer,
Or
he told me.
you're like skipping down the street through the rain, singing a song.
Yeah. I went to Cancun. There was 3,600 of them. And on Sunday, they had to leave, all of them, from a 3-day, because he had another 1,800 coming in. And there's no resort that could fit them. And these are full-time guys, right? He passed out $131 million worth of overrides.
That's awesome.
And you know what? Now the percentage of knock knock acquisitions for AT&T blow your mind. It was 12% before. Guess what it is now? If you're enjoying this episode and you're picking up what I'm putting down and what the guests are actually putting out there, do me a favor, like and comment what you liked about the episode, or even comment what would you like to hear, what topics would you like to hear in the future, because believe me, it matters. I read absolutely every single one of them, and I want to bring you more and more value to help companies scale so that we can grow this podcast to make a bigger difference. Now let's get back to the show.
37, 63, right? They're selling you a course.
Hi, how you
to
doing?
make courses to make courses.
Fair.
That's incredible.
Eventually,
No,
but these guys are.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like he has a team that's putting in the work, and then he's ensured that they have a compensation structure that rewards that hard work, which I love to see. Like, that statistic, that jump is wild. But even anecdotally, I've seen 2 things. One is because I create a lot of content like on LinkedIn, on social media, on YouTube. And so I am there also consuming content to figure out what the trends are, what I need to do. And I swipe so fast for anything that has like a TikTok shop link that says paid partnership, that says sponsored. So even when they are attempting to do like native ads, any content that even has a whiff of being inauthentic, it gets scrolled past pretty quickly. Like, you really have to index extremely high on authenticity for that type of content to work. And I hear this from my clients. I hear this from their clients and from the community. Like, people deeply are craving opportunities to gather and interact in person. Like, everybody wants to talk about AI, and that's fine. It's the shiny object. It's cool. I use a lot of it. But people are craving human connection right now. And so I have a feeling that the reps that will really be ahead come like, say, 2030 are the folks that have figured out how to use AI to support their own business, like to use AI agents to make them more effective as sellers, not to use AI to write all their copy and spam the TAM, spray and pray, ship it out, and to balance that with human connection. Because I think, like, something that I hear people say a lot, and I'm sure you've heard this too, John, with AI is like, we want to use AI to automate low value work. And then they will proceed to describe the gift of our prospects giving us time to have conversations with them. And like, never will you ever convince me that having a one-to-one dialogue with somebody, especially somebody that's considering investing in us that we need to build trust with, is a low value activity. That's
AI
great.
arc.
Unless
This is
they're ready
where
to
we.
go on a walk skipping through the rain with you. I mean, quite a few. I mean, one is related to what we've already talked about, where startup founders do feel this urgency where they have to talk to every single prospect that they have in their total addressable market, and they need to talk to them tomorrow. So in an effort to sprint, to be able to talk to all of their prospects, they end up cutting corners, sending generic messaging, doing some of that spray and pray stuff. That's a pretty big challenge I see. And when I talk to founders about what their actual revenue goals are and how many accounts they need to close to hit their revenue goals, I'll often hear things like 17, like 52. I kept talking because I wasn't sure if I was on my own thread and I should just
It's good.
keep
You can
yapping.
send me your recording as well. And I think Riverside will have it. And, like I said, we can edit this stuff out. So we're having a conversation and it's to add value to others. So we're good. But I do need to hear what you said so I can.
Yeah, I totally. I said that one of the biggest problems that I see founders encounter is that they feel this urgency to have to talk to every single one of their leads and do it tomorrow. And so they start cutting corners and they are sending, low quality communications. They are only using emails because that's the easiest to scale. And they end up burning more bridges. And what's really interesting, I think, John, is that when I talk to founders about their revenue goals and how many accounts they need to close to hit their revenue goals, I often hear numbers like, 42, 37, like 28. Like it isn't hundreds of accounts that these early stage founders need to close. And in order to close, 50 accounts, you don't need to contact 50,000 people. Yet there's a disconnect when they start doing outreach that they feel like more activity means more leads, means more revenue. And that's quite the opposite. It just means you're putting, kind of garbage out. So you get garbage in.
Yeah. And so you work with companies and their sales teams. And so for me, I understand pipeline is key is for scalable, sustainable success. Your pipeline is key. You've got to have a full pipeline. How do you work with the sales leaders and the sales teams to allow them to understand that pipeline is key and literally mining that pipeline is going to be the key to their sustainable, scalable success?
Yeah, what I teach is a 9-step process, and it's what I built throughout my career without realizing I was building it. It's what I wrote the book on. And so the 9-step blueprint for the profit generating pipeline, there's some really tactical pieces to it about building lists and segment specific messaging and how do you pick your channels and how do you build them into a sequence so that you have that segment specific narrative over the course of many touches on many steps. And then how do you treat objections with gratitude and with curiosity? How do you show up to sales conversations ready to serve because you've done the research like you mentioned? But I think what really struck me when I was writing the book is how much of my approach benches in mindset, not just skill sets. Because if you don't have if your sales team doesn't have the right mindset to approach selling with. So of course, like the mindset that the most important thing we can do is help, that we're here for win-win outcomes. But even things like understanding that active listening is the most foundational sales skill. Understanding that when you hear an objection, if you greet it with gratitude and curiosity instead of trying to like bulldoze it or tackle it or crush it or, whatever old outdated language was used, that you're going to get much, much better results and you're going to enjoy your job a lot more because it doesn't feel like you're showing up every single day to bully prospects. So the technical bits do matter, but only when the reps understand that their job is not to be combative with their prospects, but to be collaborative with them.
Yeah, I love it. And this has been a real awakening for me in my sales journey. I think in Disneyland, they have what's called Imagineers. Are they called Imagineers?
They are called Imagineers. I actually got to see I don't remember what his exact title was, like Chief Imagineer Officer, speak at an event last year. And it was so interesting. And at the end of it, he brought out two of the little robots from Star Wars, like little R2D2s. And it was so amazing.
Wow, you're so emotional about it.
It was so cool.
Yeah. So, from my essence, when I am working with companies and listening to their CFOs or CEOs or their sales leaders, like the most powerful I know that I can be is having that curiosity of like when I was a child going door to door. And I really just wanted to help people and I wanted to earn money at the same time. And so, really the more I've been in the B2B space, and it's only been a couple years, evolving from, besides I've negotiated big contracts with embassies and literally, and sold property to dignitaries and ambassadors. And I've had the opportunity to, do, multi-million dollar deals, negotiating with cosmetic suppliers for our own organization. They always call me to come in, but I'm always from the mindset of curiosity. And really, I know from my experience, the best salespeople that I've ever worked with are like curiosity engineers, right? They're literally not just active listening, but connecting the dots on how our solution can solve the biggest problem. And that drives the most value, produces the best result for the client, and the long-term, scalable, sustainable relationship. And I love your 9-step process. And I love that you talk about it's not just skill set, it's mindset. Bradley jumps on and he says, if you want to transform yourself, your life, it's your mindset, skill set, and habits. And, James Clear, he wrote Atomic Habits, and I follow this because you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your habits. But in business, you have to take it a step further. That's for individual success. As an organization and as a business, you don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems.
It's so true. It's funny because you asked me like what one of the biggest mistakes that founders make. And one of the biggest mistakes that founders make is that they don't have systems. They don't have repeatable processes, and they try to scale without those systems and foundations, and it falls flat. So that's
Yeah, we've all worked with rock stars. Have you ever worked with a rock star?
A rock star, a ninja, a guru, all of them. It's so funny. Because
can you show me a rock star scaled?
No,
not one. But their habits,
not one.
Their habits and mindset, I can scale.
Yes.
So I call it.
Sure.
So with the sales machine and in my book that's coming out, it's all about psychology, methodology built into technology.
I like that.
Because that's the sales machine software.
I like that a lot. I was trying to find it in the book, but I love so much that you brought up that quote from James Clear. I don't actually remember what freaking chapter it's in, or I would have found it faster. But I have quotes at the beginning of every chapter, and it's one of the chapter quotes is that James Clear one. So we're on the same page. I love that.
Amen. You can use my quote too. I 100% agree with him. However, in business, for it to be transformative, it's not just about the individuals. It's about the vision, the mission, the team. They're first.
Yeah.
That's first. The individual is after the vision, the mission, and the team. Because rock stars are not scalable. Processes are, systems are. So in business, we don't rise to the level of our goals, our targets, ever. We fall to the level of our systems and being able to make things scalable and sustainable. And that's been a big lesson for me. Excuse me. Because I was a rock star. I
may have described myself as a rock star at one point or another in my career.
Yeah, and guess what? Rock stars fucking burn out and fade away. And I don't want to be that guy.
Burned out
Come on, man. If you run a business, I've been unemployed for 35 years. I got out of the Navy punching holes on a submarine. a fast attack nuclear submarine. And I'm like, I'm out. I don't need to be answering to people. I kind of know how to be a man. I know what I want, and I have to show up and get it, right?
Yeah. It's so interesting to hear you talk about the role of psychology, and like I'm talking about the role of mindset, because I think we also approach this the same way that like when I come into organizations, we talk about their strategy and then how to build repeatable processes to support the strategy. But it only matters if you then enable the team with the mindsets and the skill sets to be able to execute the processes that support the strategy. And you're talking about systems. And I would add that like having systems are great as you know, founders, sale owners, but only if your team understands why they work, how they work, and that they believe and trust in you as your leader, so they'll actually follow the system. And so I love how you incorporated psychology into that, because understanding how the brains and behaviors of our team affect our ability to execute the systems and the processes and the strategies and all that effectively are also so critical.
Yeah, call me crazy, but it is the psychology, not just of the individuals, but the culture. If you don't have that right, they're not going to take care of each other. They're not going to take care of the clients. They're not going to take care of the product. So I work with the engineers. I work with the solutions management team. I work with everybody. And some people call me crazy, but I believe in doing the work because it works.
Yeah, I will not call you crazy. I will double down on what you've said. And I teach my own team. This is not something I've fully been able to incorporate in my consulting work yet. It's going to happen. But, I managed sales teams for 15 years. And what I tried to instill in them is a CEO of territory mindset, where they showed up and they looked at their accounts, they looked at their jobs to be done, and they owned it like it was their own business, which was frankly difficult for me at sometimes because it required me to give them more autonomy than maybe I felt comfortable with early in my career, when more of that like micromanagement default or like metrics management style was easier, because I was still growing and evolving into a coach and a sales leader. But I have found getting your team to embrace a CEO mindset when they think about their job, their territory, it completely changes their enjoyment of the job, but also their ability to effectively generate revenue.
Yeah, so I have a meritocracy, not a democracy. You don't get a vote unless you have merit, unless you have created merit. And at the same time, I know if you want more freedom, give some. You want more freedom, give some.
Yeah.
You got to hire people that are experts, though, because if you hire people to train and then you give them a ton of responsibility, that's on you. You fucked up, because if you brought someone on board and they're an amateur and they don't know what they're doing and they're not an expert, or they haven't put wins on the board, or you haven't mentored them and showed them the right example, I was turning over one of my offices. I just sold one of my offices. I just figured out I have like 14,400 square feet of offices. And more than half of my people are work from home. And I'm like, I don't need all these offices. So I was there. I was turning over to the other owner. And because I'm building a relationship, we're already finding ways to collaborate and work together. And, a couple of my guys were there and they were cleaning, pulling out like artwork and the rest of the stuff. And I said, let me help you out with that. And it was like 8:00 at night. And, we were in the boardroom, but it's all glass. It's just all glass and everything's open. And so I walked out and I was helping my guys. And then my partner, V, she was there and she was entertaining them, and I came back in, but I helped for like 15 minutes or whatever. And she said, Mike said, man, it's really impressive. You're over there helping out the workers. And I said, they're my people. Why wouldn't I? They're doing it.
It's a good philosophy to have.
I can do it too. What?
Yeah. There's a role that I'm sure that you have heard of, but in B2B, they'll call it like a player coach. Usually more traditional industries, I just hear it called like a team lead, where you're in between the time where you are an individual contributor, but you're not like a full-fledged manager. You're still like carrying your own quota usually. And it's interesting because I have come back to the player coach role throughout my career when I am opening new offices for companies, when I am building new products, when I am the first hire in country. And for a while, I was really ashamed about how much of my career I spent in a player coach role where I was managing teams, sometimes really large teams, way too big for me to be holding my own quota, but also selling. And what I have realized later in my career is that the amount of time that I spent carrying my own bait, carrying my own quota, doing the work alongside my reps, and whatever I was telling them to do, I was modeling, fundamentally changed both my sales acumen, but also like my leadership chops. Like I became a better leader because I understood that it wasn't enough to just like boss at people. I really had to embody the behavior I wanted to see. Like you said, like if you want the freedom, like give freedom.
And that's hard. That's a big
Yeah.
challenge for people. I'm very much into empowering people. Look, this is what you're going to do. This is how you're going to do it. This is the result I want. Now I'm just going to get out of your way and let you do it. Let me know what support you need. So I'll have a weekly meeting. So what's working, what's not working? What do you think you could do differently? Sometimes what should you stop doing? What should you start doing? What should you streamline? And then what support is needed? Okay. See you in a week.
I mean, that's kind of the dream though, right? Like I don't think I really got it as a sales leader, but now running my own companies, I'll generally have like 9 to 12 freelancers supporting me at any given time. And being able to hire people that have the work ethic and have the mindset of being proactive, where they like look for solutions without just like waiting to be told what to do. So I don't have to check in on them. Like I can just trust that they're going to get the work done and do it well. It has been so critical to making this entrepreneurial work be the type of job I want it to be, or it has allowed me to live the life that I want to live, which is a 4-day work week that indexes high on freedom and time with family and time doing hobbies instead of just what I did for the first, 15, 20 years of my career, which was grind.
I get it. I've been there, done that. And I love giving freedom because it gives me a lot. It gives me a lot of freedom. And that's the psychology I have. Trust is given. Trust is given. I give trust. Merit is earned.
Okay, I feel like that's a good quote and I need to jump. So I feel like we should go to an outro now. Cut at amazing quote. You dropped some really good one-liners. You're going to have to like go through and like write them all down so you can put them all in your book.
Yeah. So the book is to come, but I love your 9 steps in your framework, because I call them links in the chain, and you're only as strong as those links in the chain, whether you're in sales, marketing, and customer success. We are one. Sales, marketing, and customer success. We are one to continue the loop, right? And to continue the relationship. So
I like that. And it works really well because they do all stack together and they sort of all work independently. But if you don't link them together, you miss so much of the benefits. So it's a good analogy.
It's what it is. So tell us about the book and where can people find you? How can they work with you? And I'll be reaching out. I want a copy.
I would love to have a copy in your hands on launch day. Launch day is August 5th. So that means it is currently available to purchase on all e-commerce platforms, Barnes & Noble, like Amazon, a lot of local bookstores if you're into supporting local and independent bookstores. And if you go to salesledgtm.com/book, you can also put in your confirmation code, and I have over $400 in freebies of like downloads and invites to my launch parties and all of that as a thank you to everybody that pre-orders and supports.
Amen. So, yeah, obviously we're going to take advantage of that. And I'm going to look to apply whatever I can learn from your genius and your experience. You want to turn decades into days. You know, I heard Tony say this when we were traveling to Africa on a safari, Tony Robbins. You can literally, for under $30, learn from someone's entire lifetime of experiences for $30. It's the great books. I love them. They're a great resource. Thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate you so much. And then as a final note, when your book is coming out, we can release this podcast 1 or 2 weeks before, send it all out to you to pump up the volume, dance, right? To be a part of your launch. If you so choose or direct us to do that, we're all about
I would
serving
love that,
you.
please.
All right. So thanks for being on the show. That's a wrap, folks. Thanks for joining me today. And if you got value from this episode, do me a favor, like, subscribe, and refer a friend. And if you want even more value, go to thesalesmachine.com, click on resources, and there's tons of resources there to increase profits and drive performance in your business. Right on, come on.